Okay. Tuesday will be normal class. That's right. Then Thursday next week, we'll not have class, I'll be out of town. And then the 19th, Tuesday, a week from Tuesday, Andy Cole will be here as a guest speaker. So, does anybody know Andy, Dr. Cole? Have you ever met him? He's a really cool guy. I put a assignment there for you. Go study his bio a little bit, find a paper that he wrote and read it, and be ready to have a question for him when he's here. He'll get a kick out of that, and so that'll be really good. When you read his bio, you'll kind of see he's retired now. He spent a career at USDA ARS in Bushland, Texas, which is basically Amarillo, at their research feed yard in Amarillo. He focused, the end of his career, he focused on nutrient management and environmental impacts of beef cattle nutrition. And have y'all seen Top Gun? You guys have all seen Top Gun? You know the part where they talk about Viper, and he says you will not find a finer fighter pilot anywhere in the world, right? That's Dr. Cole. You will not find a finer nutrition researcher anywhere in the world. So it's great that he's willing and wants to come talk to you guys. He's got masters and PhD degrees from this department. Worked with Dr. Fred Owen, and he's very supportive of OSU. He's a donor to our graduate student scholarship program. He funds some travel scholarships for grad students in our department to go to meetings. So he's been really, really good to our department. So anyway, make sure you're planning to be here that day. I'm going to shut these doors. Yeah, I would say thank you guys for the good discussion with Dr. Sechrist. That was well done. Appreciate the effort and interaction on that. That always makes things go a whole lot better. People feel a whole lot better about spending their time here. Dr. Sechrist, obviously he was here recruiting students for positions, right? He comes every year and tries to hire 2 or 3 OSU students out of this department every year. So, did anybody get a chance to interview with him? You did? You just kind of set up an interview? Good. Excellent. Couple also. So, it's a really good organization. He's a great guy, and we've had students go there, and some have stayed long term, some don't stay long term. They'll move on to something else, in a year or 2 or 3 or something like that. But the students that have got feedback to me, they've always enjoyed working in that organization. So, and found it beneficial. So, any questions on that? So, that's really good. Questions on anything, nutrition, anything? I don't think I assigned one last time. Anybody have anything come up? Okay. Well, if you do, we'll talk about it. So, kind of what I wanted to do today was go back to Cowculator. Okay, Dr. Lawman gave you a really good introduction to kind of where it came from. We didn't get so much into using it to solve problems, and so that's what we're going to start on today. And you'll have a couple of homework assignments that are using Cowculator to solve problems and educate yourself about nutrition. Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to show you, it kind of give us a springboard for things to talk about. Everybody got it downloaded? You can kind of follow along. So I guess what I would say is, let's why don't you go into Cowculator and take here's kind of a problem. Take a 1,300 pound cow in late lactation and graze her on vegetative Bermuda grass. And kind of evaluate that nutritional situation.
You said 1,300 pounds?
1,300 pound cow, yep.
Graze her on what?
Breeds, is that what you said?
No, graze her on what?
Vegetative Bermuda grass. First couple times it takes a minute to put it back over. So, where did you, let's stop a second, kind of take inventory of where we're at. What have you got figured out so far? What are you running into? You figured out where to put in the cow, 1,300 pound cow. That was pretty straightforward. What about the vegetative Bermuda grass? Have you got that balancer screen going? So let me show you how I would do this, okay? Probably you have figured out the new calculator set up for growing and finishing cattle by default, right? So if you go up here, you can easily click this over to cows. That's the first step you gotta make. So I said this is a 1,300 pound cow. Which one of these would you pick? Late lactation, mature cow, okay? So we're gonna go late lactation, mature cow, and it's a 1,300 pounds? What do you do? What else would you do here? Anything? The mature weight. You guys see this? I believe this is kind of a bug that probably will be fixed relatively soon. But the mature weight here defaults to 2,000 pounds. Why does it default to 2,000 pounds?
Bulls.
That's the mature weight of a bull in this program. So he had the default set for a bull, okay? Most people are using this with cows. So I talked to Lawman, he's probably gonna change this, okay? So the mature weight, what should we change it to for our scenario? What should our mature weight be?
Well, I mean, she's already a mature cow, so why not just the same pounds?
Brilliant. Right. Brilliant. So if you look here, it will tell you, this is the mature weight is the expected mature weight. How you doing? I think the professor carried it back over to her office right over there. It was sitting right here. Yeah, she gathered it all up.
Sorry to bother you.
No problem, no problem. So yeah, this expected mature weight at 6 to 7 years of age when body condition score is 5. Now, I didn't tell you the age of the cow or the body condition score of the cow, but if I was a rancher and you were my consultant, you just assume that, right? So Yep. So I would say 1,300 pounds is your mature weight, okay? I didn't tell you milk production, so you can leave it at average. You could adjust it up a little bit. If I didn't tell you anything, you probably shouldn't adjust it down. Why should you not adjust it down?
Account for it all, just in case.
Gives you a little margin of safety, right? Not too many people are gonna be, if you're working with a client, not too many people are gonna be upset if their cow's a little fatter than you predicted, if the cow does a little better than what you predicted, and they had to spend a little bit more money. That most of the time, they probably won't notice that. They will be upset if their cow loses weight on what you said that she should gain weight on, right? Even if you saved them money. Because they won't know that either, that you saved them money, right? So yeah, having, probably not adjusting it down, you shouldn't, gives you, kind of builds in a little margin of safety. And we know milk production potential of cows is going up all the time, so it's rare that we have Angus cows that are really low milking. They're average at least, or high milking in modern genetics, right? So, okay, so that kind of sets that up. So I think that's pretty good. Anybody else need to change anything? Did you change anything else? Okay, so that kind of gets our cow set up.
Do we need changes to just one head?
You can. I don't think it matters on any of the math, but you can, certainly. And you can update all this client information and all that kind of stuff. That would be great. And that's a good point I thought about. I'm gonna give you some assignments. You're gonna turn in some of these pages back to me. So put your name here in the client. Put your name, and in the description, put the problem number that you're printing off, right, from the homework, so that it's easy for me to follow where you're getting your answers from. So that's a good thing to do. Another thing I would show you, since we're talking about that, if you go to print this, has anybody tried to print one of these? It apparently is not set up for printing, because if you try to print it, it looks like that, right? So Cowculator's not formatted correctly to print. It's pretty easy to fix. If you select, like, you probably have done this, but if you kind of select this area that you want to print like that, select those cells, and then go to page layout and print area, you can set the print area. Okay, so when you click that button, now when you go to print this, it shows you that, just the areas that you need. And in this case, it cut off the right-hand side, and so what you can do is set this so that you fit sheet on one page. And it makes it a little smaller, but I think it's still readable. But if you'll format it like that, then it'll print on one page, and you can turn that in, and I can flip through them pretty quickly, not have to shuffle things around and go from look at one page to another, stuff like that. So when you're turning stuff in, format it kind of like that, so it prints out like that. You'll have to do that on each sheet that you want to do. It's good to know how to do that, because if you're working as an extension agent, working as a researcher, you're giving grad students stuff to go do, working for a client, and you're giving them printouts, they want it formatted just like I'm talking about, right? So you kind of have to make sure that you present your work with some quality and some craftsmanship, right? People will follow your instructions better if it's easier to use. So that goes for this class and for your whole career. So on this page is the feed list, okay? And so you guys can see how this is organized. He's got it organized into grazed forages, harvested forages, there's concentrates. You can kind of see there's several categories down through here, okay? And there's space that you can add your own feeds if you want to this feed list, feed library, okay? So you can see here all of the specs of the feed list. If you want to update any specs or prices or anything like that, you would come here to do that, okay? An improvement in the new version of Cowculator versus the old version of Cowculator is the way you bring feeds in on the balancer. So this is a good improvement. So did you guys get to this page and get stuck, or were you working through this page? What did you think? Kind of working through it, know how to do it, done it? Okay. So for the scenario that I was talking about, what I would do in this case is kind of wipe this clean and start over. So I'm going to select all these feeds and amounts that are here, delete them, okay? So I'm kind of starting over, starting fresh. If you go with this feed category, I said we're grazing on vegetative Bermuda grass, so we're going to go to grazed forages, okay? So the category is grazed forages, and now when you look up here, you've got vegetative Bermuda grass as an option, right? On the old calculator, you had to remember that you had to go look at your feed list and remember that this was feed number 2, and so then you come over here and you type in 2, and then it would look up all the stuff, right? But now they kind of got a picked list, so it works a little nicer, okay? So you got that. That's pretty straightforward. Now what do you do? Okay, we got this cow set up. We've got a grazing vegetative Bermuda grass. Now where do you go from here? What's next? What's the next step? How much is she going to eat? That's the big next step. Okay, and that's this box right here. Is where you start with how much she's going to eat. Okay. We'll get to this here in a minute. This says pounds or percent, okay? So what number are you going to put in that box? 100. Okay, so some people say 100, other people get a surprised look on their face, right? Well, what's a different number you could put in that box?
You could estimate intake 1% body weight.
You could, absolutely. What would you guess for this cow?
30-ish pounds.
30 pounds, 30-ish pounds, yep. So you could put 30 pounds in this box and make calculator work, make the balancer work, if you think about it that way. You can also put 100% in this box and make calculator work that way, if you think about it from that approach. Both of these approaches are useful in different situations. Okay, I'm going to try to show you one here in a second where I'm going to start with percent and then I'm going to switch over to amount in a second to show you how they're useful. Okay, so here I've got 100%. I've got 100 in this box because what I'm saying is the vegetative Bermuda grass is 100% of the diet. And you can see it's 100% of the as-fed diet and 100% of the dry matter of the diet, okay? If you played with it, well, we'll do the percentages here in a minute when we change, okay? So basically what we're saying now is this cow's, 100% of this cow's diet is vegetative Bermuda grass, okay? So if we're going off of percents, doing it that way, we need to update this box right here that's feed intake in pounds as fed. This is a change in calculator from previous version that I'm not sure is an improvement. It's just a change. But you always work in calculator now, you're always working off of an as fed basis. You can't work off of a dry matter basis on intake. Okay? So you're always working on an as fed basis. Makes it probably simple to explain to ranchers and easy to communicate with ranchers to make sure that it's always going to be the same. It's always on an as-fed basis. But from a nutrition standpoint, there's extra steps in the math for us to deal with, okay? So All right, so we've got, this cow is eating what this is saying, she's eating 20.3 pounds as fed of vegetative Bermuda grass. Okay, is that accurate? Is that good? Is that where we want to be? Why not?
It's too low.
It's way too low. Why is it way too low? Not even low, it's way low.
By the time you figure in dry matter, and all the moisture content, it's very low.
Vegetative Bermuda grass is really wet, right? You can see right over here, it's, this diet is 30% dry matter, okay? So vegetative Bermuda grass, this feed in the feed library is 70% moisture. So essentially, any estimate that you have of what you think her dry matter intake is, you need to multiply by like 3 to have as fed intake in this box, okay? So what should our as fed intake be? Somebody throw out a guess. 90. Okay. So it sounds like a huge number, but that's what it is if you're working on an as fed basis, okay? So 90, what does that look like in terms of intake? Is it accurate? Is that where we want to be?
Still a little low.
Still a little low. How can you tell it's a little low?
Feed intake ratio.
Feed intake ratio, this number right here, is a clue of where your intake is, okay? So if you read the description here, feed intake ratio is a guide to estimate daily voluntary intake. So unless you have some reason to know that the formula from the nutrient requirements of beef cattle with Lallman's tweaks is inadequate, is inaccurate for what you're doing, you should probably get close to having a feed intake ratio of 1. So you want to estimate, you want to set the cow's intake so that it matches her predicted intake from this equation, unless you have some justifiable, defensible reason to not do that, right? So
where does that come from? Like, how do they calculate that?
did he go, I can't remember exactly what he talked about, much into his intake equation last week or 2 weeks ago? I don't think he did a lot, but we could get that. But it's more or less the equation that's the feed intake estimation equation that's in the nutrient requirements of beef cattle with a tweak that he put on that equation because that equation has a weird bump in it on low energy diets for some reason. So he kind of smoothed that out. So, expert opinion is where that comes from.
For grazed forages, where did the price come from?
Where did the price come from for grazed forages? It comes from the feed list.
Well, yeah.
It's got a
So, I mean,
price.
like, how did
with
they
it.
come up with those numbers?
Wild ass guess. Put it in, have something to put in the box on the spreadsheet.
Okay.
So, those are just default values. Like we were talking about the other day, the biology doesn't change, right? Over time, it changes biology changes very, very, very slowly. So the equations we build and stuff like this are good. The economics, the market prices change every day. So the economics numbers that you put in a tool like this are obsolete the day you put them in there. So if you're doing anything where prices matter to you, update the prices every time you do it. Okay. Okay, so back to this feed intake here, the feed intake ratio is 0.86, so we're 14% low on intake. You can also see here it does calculate the dry matter for you. Feed intake is 27 pounds of dry matter. The predicted intake is 31.2, and right now we're at 2.02% of body weight on dry matter. Okay, so we're low. So we're gonna bump this up to 100, which is about 0.96, so we're in the ballpark of being right. We could add a little bit, like 103 pounds, 104 pounds. It's annoying that it doesn't stay on that, so 104 pounds. So 104 pounds as fed gives us 31.2 pounds of dry matter. That's right on 101%. So now, in my use of this tool, the intake is correct. Okay, I've got the cow correct, I've got the forage correct, I've got the intake correct. Okay, so now I'm real close to knowing what to do with the nutrition for this cow. So we got that done. Okay, now you look at your balancer screen. Now what do you look at to evaluate this cow's nutritional situation?
Our statuses.
Okay, there's lots of places you could go to look at evaluating what's going on. You probably want to develop some kind of systematic way of doing this, of checking these things. I don't know that one order is better than the other. Some of the things are kind of we've got different ways of telling you the same information, but you kind of want to have some systematic way of going through it, okay? One thing you can do is come over here and check the statuses, and these are just little check boxes, flags that tell you if the daily amount from the dry matter, from the situation here, meets the requirement of the animal from the nutrient requirements of beef cattle. Okay, so you can see what the requirement is, and you can see what's being supplied right here in this column. So these little flags are saying everything's adequate except sodium is deficient and cobalt is deficient. Okay, so those are micronutrients. We'll talk about those here in just a second, but I kind of skip over the micronutrients until I've got the macronutrients fixed the way that I want them. Because when you change things to fix the macronutrients, you're changing pounds, large percentages of the diet, and the micronutrients fluctuate a bunch when you do that. So there's really no point in trying to do anything with micronutrients until you have the macros set and you got your diet ingredients pretty well set. Okay, so the first thing I do, especially with cows, is check protein. Okay, so this diet is supplying 5 pounds of protein per day. The requirement is 2.6 pounds of protein for this cow. So we're way over on protein. Okay, another place you can look is come right down here, and you can see the protein ratio is 1.92. So that means this diet is supplying 192% of this cow's requirement. Okay, so we're way over on protein. What do you do about that? Feed way too much protein. How do you fix that? Offset it with something. Okay. What would you offset it with?
Not so good bale hay.
Anti-protein?
Yeah.
Yeah. What? Physics. Annihilate some of the.
Or decrease intake.
Or decrease intake? You could decrease intake. Okay. A little bit of a trick question, right? We're feeding way too much protein. How do you fix that? Well, back up. The question is, does it need fixed? Right? What do you think? In this scenario, does it need fixed? Not necessarily. This cow's just grazing good grass, right? It's a good time of the year. Grass has been good. She's out on pasture. There's nothing to fix here, right? It's way too much protein. It's way more than she needs. But it's not a problem. There's nothing to fix. Okay? So protein ratio, you check that 1.92. It's above what she requires. There's not really a way to reduce how much protein we're feeding. We're not gonna restrict her intake of the forage that she's grazing on. We're not gonna feed her, we're not gonna buy another feed that's lower in protein to reduce her performance and spend extra money. So it just is what it is. She's just got plenty of protein, no problem. Okay? So protein ratio there, and you can see the adequate status here. The other place that I think is an improvement to Cowculator that I like is this TDN to crude protein ratio. Dr. Lawman mentioned that the other day. Have you guys ever heard of that before? Carly, you should have heard of that before, right? You remember that?
Yes.
From our other class where I talked
Yes.
about that, right? Maybe. TDN to crude protein, you've used TDN to crude protein ratio. How do you use it?
Because I was looking at protein supplementation rate on forage intake, and the TDN to crude protein ratio of the forage tends to be associated with how it affects forage intake.
Yeah. Okay, that's correct. Someone explained to me how TDN to crude protein ratio affects forage intake, or how it's useful in nutrition.
Lower TDN, lower digestibility.
Okay? If you have lower TDN, you get lower digestibility of the forage. So with lower TDN, there's less carbohydrate available to ferment in the rumen, right? So you need bacteria, you need fewer bacteria, and you need them less active and at a slower growth rate, right? The less carbohydrate that you have, the less bacteria that you really need in the rumen, okay? Bacteria require nitrogen for growth. So the TDN that you have in the diet, the available carbohydrate in the diet, is related to how much nitrogen the rumen microbes need. Those two things kind of go together. The more TDN you have, the more nitrogen you need. The less available carbohydrate, the less nitrogen you need. Okay? You need to keep TDN, available carbohydrates, and nitrogen in balance in the rumen. Those two nutrients kind of have to be in balance to use the energy that's available in the feedstuff, okay? If you have a feedstuff that the nitrogen is way out of whack, way out of balance with the available carbohydrates, then those carbohydrates are not going to be utilized efficiently, right? Your feed efficiency, feed conversion, energetic efficiency is going to suffer if your available carbohydrates and nitrogen get out of balance, okay? And the balance point is a TDN to crude protein ratio of about 6. That's the balance, okay? So a forage, the way I look at this, if you have a forage that has a TDN to crude protein ratio of 6, what that forage is telling you is that the forage is saying, I'm in balance. This situation is balanced for the rumen, and there's enough protein, enough nitrogen available in this feed to essentially fully utilize the available carbohydrates in this feed, okay? If you have a TDN to crude protein ratio that's way out of balance, you need to do something. You need to add something to that diet to regain the balance so that you get back to an efficient use of those carbohydrates. If you have a TDN to crude protein ratio that gets really, really high, okay, like 10-to-1, what does that mean? Not enough nitrogen, right? If you get a TDN to crude protein ratio of 10, you don't have enough nitrogen. You're short on nitrogen. So when you see forages that have TDN to crude protein ratio of 10, immediately you already know, before you even do any math or open any computer or anything, you can look at a feed test and see TDN to crude protein ratio is 10, I gotta have a protein supplement immediately. If you see one that's 14 to 1, you say, I gotta have a big protein supplement, right? I need a lot of protein in this scenario. If you see a TDN to crude protein ratio of 2.5 to 1, what does that tell you?
A lot of nitrogen.
You got a lot of nitrogen. It's the other, just exactly the other direction. You got a lot of excess nitrogen in this forage, okay? Is that a problem? Not necessarily. It's not as big a problem as having way too little nitrogen, but it's still not efficient, right? It's kind of like this scenario here. You're feeding way too much protein. It's not necessarily a problem, but we could increase the efficiency by adding in some available carbohydrates to bring the diet back close to 6 to 1. Because we've got the protein to use these carbohydrates, so we can add some cheap carbohydrates and increase the energy balance of the animal, okay? So, ideal balance point is 6 to 1. If you get way above that, you got a problem with not enough nitrogen. If you get way below that, you've got an opportunity to improve the energetic status of the animal efficiently with adding some carbohydrates. If you get this 14 to 1, let's just do it instead of explaining. Let's do it on calculator, okay? So, let's go back to this scenario. So that's what I'm looking at, okay? TDN to crude protein ratio is 4, it's okay. We can improve the energetic efficiency of this cow by adding some carbohydrates. It's probably not worth it, right? This cow is gaining 1.3 pounds a day. 1.3 pounds a day, all we need her to gain is less than 1/10 of a pound a day. She's already in good body condition. Sit back and, this is one of the good days, right? Enjoy it, don't screw it up. That's the thing here, right? This is a day you don't have to feed cows. See that? Okay. Can everybody reproduce that on your machine? You're able to do that? Okay, let's take this cow and change her to a fall, mature, harvested Bermuda grass hay. Okay, same cow, same stage of production, but now instead of having good Bermuda grass pasture available, we're going to feed her some hay. So we're going to go to harvested forages and Bermuda grass hay. Let's go full bloom Bermuda hay, okay? Something to look at real quick before we change. You can see that this vegetated Bermuda grass was 16% protein, 65% TDN, pretty good stuff, okay? We're gonna go to full bloom Bermuda grass hay, and now our protein is 8% and TDN's 52. So it's not junk, but it's on the low side of moderate quality, right? So did that change this nutritional scenario of this cow? Absolutely. How do we evaluate this scenario? What's the first thing you do?
Not the intake.
Fix the intake, okay? Now we're way over on intake here because it's dry hay, right? All the moisture's gone. So now we're gonna be back to something realistic like 35 pounds. Well, that wasn't even realistic. I'm still over, I'm 18% over, right? So I'm gonna go 25, I just kind of iterate till I find a good spot here. 29.75 pounds as fed, pretty close. Okay, so now I've got the intake fixed for this cow in this scenario, and now I can kind of evaluate where I'm at. Can you follow? Can you do that? Follow along? Okay. So how do you evaluate this? What do you see?
Deficient in protein.
Deficient in protein, where? Where do you see it?
Over there and over there.
It should be in both places, right? Crude protein here is deficient. We need 2.6 pounds, we're only getting 2.17. So we need 0.4 of a pound of protein additional. It's also down here, we're at 83% of protein requirement, okay? So we're deficient in protein. Another thing that's you want to see she's losing 3/4 of a pound a day. We want her to gain 1/10 of a pound a day. So in 100 days of ignoring this scenario, she's gonna be in a body condition score 4. Right? Which is not what we want. So those are things to evaluate, okay? The macros are kind of the same. You'll see how this changes here in a second, okay? So we have to fix this, another thing to point out. Our TDN to crude protein ratio is 6.5. So where does that fall on your analysis? How do you interpret that? What's that?
I think it's pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's close to 6. It's pretty well in balance. If anything, it's a little short of protein, but it's pretty close to being in balance. Okay? So how do you take all this and decide what to do from here? What are you gonna do?
Add a little protein.
Add a little protein? How?
Supplements.
Okay? Your TDN to crude protein ratio is balanced pretty much, so why are you adding protein?
They're still deficient.
They're still deficient.
And she's still losing weight.
And she's still losing weight. Okay. Remember, the TDN to crude protein ratio is about the feed. Okay? What this is saying is there's enough protein in this forage to utilize the carbohydrates, get the energy out of this forage. So the TDN to crude protein ratio is about the feed. The feed is balanced. The feed doesn't need any extra protein. The cow needs extra protein, right? So the TDN to crude protein ratio doesn't tell you anything about the requirements of the animal. It doesn't tell you if they're getting enough nutrients. It just tells you the feed is balanced, okay? You could have ground up cardboard boxes with a little bit of urea and make that TDN to crude protein ratio balanced. Cows are gonna look like shit. But you can make it balanced, right? So remember, TDN to crude protein ratio is about the forage, about the feed. So yeah, so even though that's balanced, we still don't have enough nutrients going into this cow. We have to get some more nutrients. We need protein and we need energy, okay? So we're gonna feed a supplement. What supplement?
It's soybean meal.
We could do soybean meal. Okay, we could do soybean meal. Why would we feed soybean meal? It's very high in protein. It's a great source of protein. We're short of protein, so a great source of protein would help us, right? Anybody else got a different idea besides soybean meal?
Something a little cheaper.
Something cheaper, okay? We could pick soybean meal is expensive, right? It's excellent protein, but it is oftentimes expensive. So we could pick something cheaper. What would be cheaper?
A byproduct of some sort.
Which one?
Just because there's DDGs out there, it's easy to feed.
DDGs, okay? We could feed DDG, we could feed corn gluten feed.
And it's higher.
Typically those are,
And it's higher in fat.
it's higher in fat than soybean meal, right? So this is the way I think about this. In this scenario, okay, I need protein and I need energy, right? And soybean meal is not gonna be my most cost-effective source of energy. It might be my most cost-effective source of protein, could be, because it's so high in protein. It's 48% protein, right? So it can be pretty expensive per ton and still be cost-effective for a protein source because half of it's protein, right? DDGs are only 28% protein. So basically I can, on a protein basis, I can pay twice for soybean meal what I can for DDG per ton. You see that? Because it's twice as concentrated in soybean meal, right? So it's not so much that it's not cost-effective source of protein, it's that it's not a cost-effective source of energy, which I also need. Okay. So probably I would not choose soybean meal in this situation. You could, it's just gonna be more expensive than you need it to be. DDGs would work pretty well in a scenario like this. What about soybean, what about corn? That's the most cost-effective source of energy, probably. What about corn?
Not high enough in protein.
It's not gonna bring me much protein, right? So I could use corn, but I'd have to feed something else to get the protein, probably. It gets complicated, DDGs are a good compromise. Also a good compromise, 20% breeder cubes. Okay, there's a reason they sell barges full of those things every year, right? So let's do 20% cubes to make it easy and fix this. Okay, so again, back to the question, how do you fix this? Is there something here to fix? Yeah, there's something here to fix. This needs fixed, okay? This might be a good place as well to stop for just a second. Let's look at this protein ratio. Okay, 0.83, we're 17% short of protein. The TDN, well, we're 17% short of protein. So, what do you think that, what effects could that have in this balancer? If you're short protein, what other ramifications are you going to see in the nutritional environment of this cow? What's going to happen to intake? What's going to happen to forage digestibility in the rumen if you're short of protein? It's not going to be what you expect it to be, right? If you're short protein, it's not going to be what you think it should be. If forage digestibility is not what you think it should be, passage rate's not going to be what you think it should be, therefore intake is not going to be what you think it should be, right? If you are deficient in protein, and especially if this TDN to crude protein ratio is wrong, is way above 6, especially then. If you are deficient in protein, that's out of whack. This intake estimate, predicted dry matter intake, is not what's going to happen. The cow's going to eat much less forage than that. Okay? So you got a real problem here. You know, this cow's already losing 3/4 of a pound a day, except that we've really got her intake too high in this scenario. So, you know, she's probably more like 24 pounds. So she's probably eating 20% less than you expect because she's so deficient in protein. So now she's actually going to lose 1.5 pounds a day in reality, right? So now it's only 60 days to lose 1 condition score. You'll almost see that coming off of them every day, right? So that's another reason, that's another place to check and how to go through an evaluation of these nutritional programs, okay? So let's get back to our intake where we think it should be, because we know basically we've got to fix this protein problem, okay? So we're going to use 20% cubes, or no, we're going to go, forgot, it's not a concentrate, it's a commercial feed, the 20% cubes, right? So we're going to go to 20% cubes, range cubes. How much do we need to feed? 10% of the diet. Okay, we could do that. We could feed 10% of the diet. One thing you can think, you already know how much protein short you are. Like, rule of thumb, this cow is going to need 3 pounds of 20s. I'm just guessing, just from experience. In this scenario, she's going to need 3, maybe. 3 pounds of 20s, okay? But you can look and see that you're 0.4 pounds of protein short, right? So how many pounds of 20% cubes do you need to provide 0.4 pounds of protein? you do that math in your head.
What was that again?
It's 20% protein. The cubes are 20% protein. So each pound of cubes has 0.2 pounds of protein. So you need about 2 pounds to supply 0.4 pounds of protein, right? So right off the bat, in your head, you can kind of estimate you need about 2 pounds of 20s to fix the protein problem, okay? That's not gonna be enough probably to fix the energy problem, so I bet she's gonna need 3, maybe 4, okay? But let's do 2 pounds, we're gonna add 2 pounds of 20% cubes. So how do we do that in this scenario? Let's see, she's eating 30 pounds of forage. We need to add 2, so what percentage, what's 2 pounds as a percent of 32 pounds? That gets hard for me to do in my head, right? It's about 8%. So
Well,
you're,
9% is.
Could you change it to pounds
so,
instead of percent?
yeah, so your 10% was a good guess. Okay, but here's where calculator switching the other way makes this a whole lot easier, okay? So now we're gonna kind of start over and go the other direction on building this diet for this cow, okay? If you've only got one ingredient, using the percent works pretty well, right? You can call it 100%. If you're mixing a diet, if you're putting together a feed yard diet and it's a total mixed ration, working on percents works pretty well because it's always going to add up to 100%, right? If you're feeding so many pounds of supplement per day and then ad lib hay or ad lib forage, I can't think about working in percents. I think about working in pounds. So I would do it this way. I would say she's going to eat 28 pounds of grass and 2 pounds of 20s. And I would just change it, okay? So you can see, it does the calculations for you, that diet is now 23.5% hay and 6.5% cubes, but it makes more sense to me to say, I'm gonna feed her 20% cubes and ad lib hay, which I estimate to be 28 pounds a day. That's how everybody you talk to is gonna think about it, right? Okay, so that's 28 pounds and 2 pounds. Okay, when you do that, what you're doing now in this mix of feeds is saying, you're saying the cow's gonna eat these 30 pounds, right? It adds up to 30 pounds. Now you have to change feed intake to be 30 pounds. So every time you adjust something here on a pounds basis, this box has to match that box, or you're not doing what you say you're doing, okay? So when you're on a pounds basis, every time you gotta remember to update that box. If you're working on a percentage basis, it's always 100%, you just feed the pounds that you want, okay? So, that's the advantage of working in pounds or percent, depending on the scenario. So what do you evaluate now? Protein, did we have enough? We didn't get enough. Okay, what about our feed intake ratio? Is that where we want to be? Probably pretty close. We didn't get enough protein, and we're still short on average daily gain. So how do we fix it? Feed more cubes, right? 2 wasn't enough. 3 is going to be about enough. Okay. Now we've got 31 pounds that we're feeding, so we got to change this to 31 pounds. Okay. So now our feed intake is 1% over the prediction. It's probably in the ballpark. I wouldn't be upset about it. You can reduce it a little bit to be 1 exactly if you want to, but 1%, it's in the ballpark, right? So our intake's okay. Our protein ratio is 1.02, it's right on the money, so we're good there. So this cow has enough protein now. She can eat all of this and extract all of the energy. And so now, everything that's over here is legitimate, right? All of and the growth estimates and everything are legit because we've got enough protein to actually do what we say we're doing. If you're short on protein again, all this stuff over here is garbage. Okay. Now what do you look at? Average daily gain, she's still losing weight, right? Losing 0.3 of a pound a day, not gonna be, that's not acceptable. So what do? Keep feeding more. Pour it to them, right? Gotta keep feeding more. We don't need the protein, now we're feeding 20% cubes for the energy that's in them, right? What?
I was saying, does it have to be the cubes, or can you just add in like 1 pound of steamed flake corn or something?
You absolutely can do 1 pound of steamed flake corn, absolutely. The math works perfect. Why would you not do that? Anybody?
Hard to feed corn on pasture.
Yeah. If you got cows grazing a paddock, they're out feeding hay and you're feeding supplement, who's got steamed flake corn available? Nobody. Who's gonna feed a pound of steamed flake corn and 3 pounds of 20s when they could just feed 4 pounds of 20s? Nobody.
We'd have to have a feed truck too.
You'd have to potentially have a feed truck. 1 pound of steamed flake corn wouldn't be a problem, but feeding a lot of corn, you could cause negative associative effects in the rash in the diet. Feeding too much starch, reduce forage intake. 1 pound of corn wouldn't do that, but 8 pounds of corn would. So, yeah, math works perfect, nutrition's fine, just the practicality, logistics, nobody would do that. So I would feed 4 pounds of range cubes, okay? So now we're at 32 pounds, so I'm saying she's eating 32 pounds. I'm gonna change this to 32. I'm at 1.3, it's probably still in the ballpark, probably within the margin of error. But I'm trying to be conservative. I'm trying to make sure that the cow performance for my client is this good or better. I don't want it to be worse than this. I don't want to overestimate intake, right? So I'm gonna back my intake down a little bit until I'm pretty close to the predicted intake, okay? So the way I have to do that, I'm gonna feed 4 pounds of range cubes. I know she's gonna eat that. She's not gonna eat quite as much hay now, right? She's got ad lib hay, but if I'm feeding 4 pounds of cubes, I'm starting to get into where she's substituting cubes for hay. We're gonna replace a little bit of the hay. So now I'm gonna knock this hay down to 27 pounds. My total intake's 31 pounds. So this cow's losing 0.2 of a pound a day instead of gaining 1/10 of a pound a day. But the rest of it looks pretty good. I'm pretty close. I think I'm pretty close right here. We could feed a little more if we want to if you want it to be, want her to gain weight, right?
I've got a question. So
Mhm.
I got it set at 6 pounds range cubes and
Yep.
25.5 Bermuda.
Uh-huh.
And so that gets the average daily gain up to 0.06, but it still has her as losing weight, and then maternal tissue is negative 0.01.
So tell me again what you did?
25.5 A, and then 6 range cube.
6. Okay.
Would you be concerned with that?
I'm
That
not.
down there?
I would not be.
5,000.
I'm not even exactly sure. I'm not even exactly sure. Well, I guess the maternal tissue is all the placenta and all that kind of stuff. So, pretty minor. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. So this scenario is about as close as you can kind of get it with 20% cubes, right? You got 20% cubes, you're feeding 6 pounds. Your protein ratio now is 18, so you're 118, so you're feeding 18% too much protein. You probably could do this. Probably could do this scenario with something different besides 20% cubes and maybe get a little cheaper, right? So if we would need something with the energy of a 20% cube with a little less protein, cheaper than 20% cubes, what would that be? That's probably soybean oils. So you could substitute soybean oils. They don't have quite as much energy, but they're less, the protein's pretty close. I would imagine soy oils would be cheaper than 20% cubes per ton, feeding 6 pounds. So those are kind of the, now we're really like fine tuning the supplementation program for this cow, okay? So now we could argue about what's logistically the easiest thing for your client to do. Which one of these is cheaper? Is this supplementation program gonna cost 73 cents a cow a day or 68 cents a cow a day? Some people that really matters to them, some people don't care. I'm gonna feed 20s because it's easy, right? But that's where we are now, is kind of fine tuning that, doing the fine tuning stuff. But you see, hopefully going through there, you see how to use Cowculator to help train you to just kind of intuitively see how you can evaluate the nutritional status of a cow and determine in the big picture where you need to go with supplementation, right? You know, you can kind of see if you're going to need a big protein supplement or not, roughly how much of that protein supplement to throw in here, what kind of ingredient is going to fit the scenario that you're needing, right? Kind of see, you get a little better feel for some of those things. Questions, comments? Okay. So that basically is how I use Cowculator. That's how I think it's a real useful way to use Cowculator. So I posted a homework assignment. You can start working on that. We got 5 minutes if you want. I was intending to give you 15 or 20 minutes to work on that. But there's a homework assignment of using Cowculator to do a couple of things like this, and then to also go in and adjust things on here to kind of show yourself the energy requirements of some of these different cows in different nutritional scenarios, okay? Driving home the point of making sure that you proactively manage nutrition so that you don't have dig a big hole that you gotta climb out of nutrition, right? So that's kind of what the homework is. So you work on that, turn it in on Tuesday. Let me know if you have questions, and we'll go from there. Okay. One other thing I guess I would show you for the homework that you might be interested in. We talked about feed intake, right? And setting the feed intake to 1. And that's really important if you're trying to make all of this stuff be, if reality is going to match what you see in this model, right? So this is just a model, it's just a tool. You can play with it, you can make it do whatever you want to answer any question that you have, right? So let's see, what's the maintenance requirement of this cow, assuming, well, what's the overall energy requirement of this cow per day? This cow's in late lactation, so she's got maintenance requirements. She's got a little bit of maternal tissue, fetal tissue, and she's milking 15 pounds a day. So how much energy does that take for this cow? Would you know where to find that? How much protein does it take to do that? Here's the requirement for protein, right? 2.59. So it takes 2.59 pounds of protein a day to do this. How much energy does it take to do this? .8 megacals of any M does this, right? That's how much energy it takes to do this, because when you feed that much energy, this is what happens. You follow what I'm saying there? It's kind of a neat, you can use the model that way to answer other questions. This is how much energy it takes to do this scenario. How much energy does it take to make this cow gain 3 pounds a day? How would you do that? How would you figure that out?
Get it to her projected average daily gain of
How? Keep feeding her, right?
Add energy.
Keep feeding her. Make her gain 3 pounds a day, right? How would you do that? Feed her 40 pounds. Or 50. Or 60. Make her eat 60 pounds of it, in theory. Now in reality, is she gonna do that? No. But the math will work, right? If you wanted a cow, theoretically, if you wanted a cow in this scenario to gain 3 pounds a day, how much energy does that take? Well, it takes 28.2 megacals of NEM. That's another really nifty way to understand this model and be able to use it to answer nutrition questions, teach yourself things about nutrition and energy. Okay? So that'll be useful on your homework assignment. Any other questions? All right. Very good. We will see you Tuesday, if not before. The thing did post on Canvas, right? Michelle?